Welcome to Dynamo's Dozen, the podcast that I bring you each and every single week where I talk about whatever may be on my mind, from pro wrestling, sports, entertainment, music, movies, muesli, fresh socks and jocks, and everything in between, never forgetting that sweet powdery talc. I am here with my right hand man, my partner in crime, my fucking yin to my yang, whatever you want to call it, Mr. Niall Hogan, the the host of the Upper Tier podcast, which you can also find on the Dynamo Podcast Network. He is also your brand new host of the Four Podmen, which yours truly appears on as well. And basically, he is one of the, if not the backbone of the Dynamo Podcast Network, which you can find on YouTube. And be sure, before you do anything else today, hit that bell notification, hit the like and subscribe button, smash the notification button, and guess what? You'll find our beautiful faces on every single time you go and search quality pro wrestling, football, whatever you can think of, we'll do it. If you need a chef program, hit us up and we'll get one of them going too. It's all good. Um, Mr. Hogan,
How are we?
we're very good. We're very good.
Good, good.
Dynamo's Dozen is back in business, baby. But today, what we decided we're gonna do a little mini series within Dynamo's Dozen at the moment, because with the Four Podmen, we are going to be looking and taking a deep dive into the Dark Side of the Ring series. Um, I'd say by the time this podcast airs, we may have already done one. I'm not too sure. We'll see what way the timing works, but we decided that we do. In fact, no, I correct myself. Actually, this one will be going up before that. This will be the first. This will be the first, because we're gonna do these little mini breakaway episodes, and you yourself and myself decided that we would take a look at the A&E series that they kind of, with the partnership that they have with WWE now. They're doing some great content. They're obviously doing bios on. They've done one on Macho Man, which we are going to be talking about today. They've done one on Roddy Piper. They've done one on Stone Cold Steve Austin. They're going to be doing many, many more. And of course, they're doing a show which is pretty cool and pretty close to our hearts, where they're going back and looking at stuff that WWE has lost in terms of props and ring worn stuff, and they're going back and finding it.
Yeah,
And even though it's a bit of a work, and you know that they know exactly where the stuff is,
yeah,
you know, again, it's like a pro wrestling match itself. For an hour, you can watch it and lose yourself in it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um,
It's like if you when you go on holidays somewhere, let's say to the US or something,
yeah,
and you find a shop, and you visit that shop, and you find a little bit of memorabilia there that you never, that Hasbro figure, or
yeah,
an old comic shop, and you walk in and it's all dusty and everything. We did it one time when we were used. We walked in, the dust was thick on this stuff, like no one had ever been in this shop. It
yeah.
was nearly reminded me of that shop out of Pulp Fiction, where you'd be worried about getting dragged down to the basement or something like
Bring
that.
out the
You know what I
gimp.
mean? Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. But that's what looking at those things is like, when they break out. I think they broke out an Undertaker's mask on one of them, and his jacket and all was really cool, like. But of course it is a little bit contrived, because I'm sure Vince McMahon knows where every single one of these pieces is. They're probably 2 doors down from his office.
That's it. It's like with the
Yeah,
Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman
yeah,
one. Like, it was known for years
yeah,
that Bill Apter had the,
yeah,
had the neck brace, but at the same
yeah, yeah,
time, it's a really kind of cool concept for
yeah,
people that didn't know that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's easy to know this stuff when you are a
yeah,
collector and you kind of read up on it,
yeah,
but when you don't, it's amazing. And seeing that
yeah,
Undertaker
yeah,
purple jacket and the Phantom mask come out was really, really super cool. So we're
yeah,
gonna we're gonna do a review, and we'll probably do a little bit of a I'd say next week we'll probably do a bit of a all fits one of the episodes that have come in so far, so that we don't lose
yeah.
people.
Mm.
Um, but today, Noel, on your request, we decided that we would do a bit of a look into the A&E Macho Man Randy Savage documentary, because obviously last week, while I was off vacation and nowhere, because you can't go anywhere. Um, you guys done a Macho Man series for the Four Podmen.
Yeah,
I wasn't actually part of that, as people know by now, by the amount of downloads and views that we've had so far. So thanks everybody for that. Um, but you decided it'd be a good opportunity for us to kind of review it in a different way and look at the actual documentary and kind of maybe match it up about kind of what you guys spoke about. And me being such a Macho fan myself, I kind of felt that I lost out on that too. So I was kind of glad that you brought that idea up. So what did you think of the documentary first and foremost?
It was kind of an interesting contrast with the episode that we did for the Podmen,
Mm.
because I think it was Jay who made the point on the Podmen episode that like he went and he had his career, and then he kind of went away, and we didn't hear a whole lot about him. Once he moved out of wrestling, he put that behind him, and he moved on with his life, and we didn't hear a whole lot. Whereas if you look at the biography, I really enjoyed the A&E biography, but it took a kind of a sharp turn from being a biography about Macho Man to becoming a bit of a hatchet job. I don't know if you got that feeling about it, that it sort of went down a path. I don't know, where it kind of felt like it stopped being an episode about Macho Man Randy Savage and started being kind of an episode about Hulk Hogan, Lex Luger, and Liz, and Gorgeous George, and things like that. And I was kind of a bit weirded out by that, in terms of obviously a lot of the stuff we know, and our listeners will know the history of what has gone on and stuff like that. But I felt, yeah, just at that point in the episode, it took a sharp turn left. And sort of it's like as if they lost their way a little bit, and they felt like they had to include like the amount of Hulk Hogan in it and stuff like that. It overrided the thing, I felt. Um, I don't know what some of the people on it were on it for, because clearly some of them have no connection with him at all. So why would they
And
even be there?
agendas. I mean, at the very, very start, I was almost willing to switch it off when I saw that fat piece of fucking garbage Bubba the Love Sponge, who I don't rate
Yeah,
as a human being at all.
yeah,
Um, and that's not just to stick up for Hogan, but at the same time, he did throw Hogan under a bus. What kind of friend does that and then tries to make a buck out of you when you know
yeah,
that your friend's already gone through a multi million dollar divorce? And basically, he set his agenda very clear at the start of it, didn't he? He goes, "Nothing good comes from Tampa. Hulk Hogan, whores, and cheap dollar." Like, he's trying to be funny, and you're like, "Well, this isn't really the place to be making a comedic comeback, in my
yeah,
opinion." So I
yeah,
didn't see. I agree with you. I didn't see the relevance of Bubba the Love Sponge, who doesn't have a relationship with Macho Man Randy Savage,
yeah.
being on that show. Um,
Yeah, I thought like it was kind of like, if you think about like his relationship with Steamboat, and obviously he had the relationship with Hogan as well.
And
But if you think,
for a long time, a good relation. I mean, let's be real. I know on the Podman, you've got people like Joe and Jay, which I kind of felt were probably a bit harsh on some of Hogan's stuff there, the way they were saying, "Oh, all Hogan wanted to do was hold him back." I think on this documentary, you actually see verifiably that Hogan did introduce him to that tailor where he got all of those beautiful, ring jackets and stuff like that. I think Hogan genuinely was um, you know, trying to help the guy out. I mean, yeah, of course, Hogan is all, and Jay made a great point on the Podmen that look, at the end of the day, Hogan had to be the biggest shark in those waters. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, they were all going to do that. It would have been
yeah,
someone else if not him. But I think
yeah,
there was a love from Hogan's side to Macho, and I think one of the good thing about this episode, I think it does portray that jealous side that Macho had, and I think but I think that gets lost in translation sometimes. I mean, yes, it was wrong that he was locking up his missus in a locker room, and of course it was, but at the same time, it's kind of almost damage avoidance as well, right? You're thinking this is the way Macho's mind is probably thinking at that time. I know these guys, they will just jump on her like a fucking like a vulture if
well, history would tell you he was doing the right thing, but just going the wrong way about it.
yes,
That's what it would tell you. And I mean, we know that. I mean, we don't need the A&E biography to show that. I mean, history will show.
absolutely.
And then it was kind of weird, it's just, I know we're going to get into it as we talk about it anyway. I just felt that the people that were key in his career either weren't on it, and I know some of them obviously have passed, or when they were on it, they didn't get enough time. Like if you think about how monumental the match at WrestleMania 3 is with Ricky Steamboat and stuff like that. I mean, it's by far, it goes down in history as nearly one of the greatest wrestling matches ever. And it
Probably.
definitely stole the show at 3. When you think you'd Hogan and Andre, it was really the main event.
Well, it's
2
probably
matches before.
arguably up there with Stone Cold and Bret, or
Yeah.
Undertaker and Michaels. It's arguably one of the best Mania wrestling matches of all time. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I call it for it. I mean, I describe it as being timeless. It's the kind of match you can pull out on any given day and watch it and wholeheartedly enjoy it and not feel like it was back in the mid 80s or whatever it was. You know what I mean?
What did you think of Vince and Steamboat talking about that, actually, while we're on that subject? I thought it was cool the way Steamboat was saying move number 1, 2, 3, 4. Because we've always heard that kind of legendary story of Steamboat, who was obviously a call it in the ring kind of guy. Yeah. But I think Savage was very much so a call it in the ring kind of guy as well. But when he got to that level of wanting to be the tippy top, he wanted perfection. Do you know what I mean? I don't think Savage would have had a problem calling a match in the ring.
I think my feeling on it was that he had a huge amount of respect for Ricky Steamboat, first of all. And I think, too, as you said, the bigger sharks were in the main event. And these were the Tiger Sharks coming up against the Megalodons.
Yes.
And they had to set the bar. And that match couldn't afford to go wrong, lose its way, miss the storytelling of it. You George Steele out there, you had Elizabeth, you had a lot of stuff going on in that match. There's a lot of psychological, levels within that match and different narratives coming through that have to be kind of managed within the match, if you like.
Yeah.
And I just think, I can understand why he did it. And I know these days, and I know even back then in some respects, it's kind of frowned upon that you would lay out a match in a 3-page, move for move and stuff like that. And of course, Steamboat, is an absolute exceptional wrestler, worker and all,
Yeah, I'd have been lost. I'll be honest with you. I'd have been lost after lockup.
Yeah, but just imagine, you know what I mean? But I just think it shows the meticulous way of Macho Man. Again, and we mentioned it on the pod, man, being so selfless insofar as, 1, they wanted to set the bar against what was coming after them. 2, they definitely wanted to steal the show and show that there kind of was a little bit of a changing in the guard in terms of the monsters versus the mid-sized men, if you like.
Yeah.
And I just think 3, he also wanted to put across the fact that it was a monumental thing that Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was going to win the IC belt off him after the build up to it. And we mentioned it with the attack with the bell and the larynx and all that kind of stuff. There was a massive build up to that match. And it was kind of needle in it,
There was. Yeah.
And I remember even Steamboat, he was like, they portrayed Steamboat at the time. Remember when Billy Graham came back with the hip operation and he was crawling up the mountain and falling off the crutches? Now, Steamboat was the same. The narrative was he'd never talk again. He had lost his voice. This was all Macho Man's fault. Boom, 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 boom. And I remember they were doing sit downs with him. Remember, and he'd have the big plaster across the neck and he could barely talk. And
he went so far. He went so far as his own family. Steamboat is known for literally being kayfabe back in the day. He used to rub a wet towel on his face to the point where he'd grizzle up his face so it looked like he was in a straightener. And apparently, even with his own family, he used to kind of be talking like that, So they actually, the wife and all, thought like this lad's had to been hurting work.
Yeah, but I just think for the magnitude of that match, and when you consider, where you're given airtime on this biography to sort of Bubba the Love Sponge and people like that, who basically just tried to destroy the man and use their power on a radio show to try and entice this man out and, annoy him when he had moved on.
Yeah.
And I just thought, a lot more time should have been given to that match and maybe Ricky Steamboat and stuff like that, rather than giving airtime to these other guys that were really fucking up to shenanigans and really no relevance to the man's career, really, good or bad.
I agree. Yeah,
that's kind of it.
Vince McMahon made an appearance on it as well, and he talks about it still being one of the mecca matches. You know what I mean? And you mentioned earlier, timeless. Vince McMahon himself said that, and you can tell what that match meant to Vince, because everyone will always remember the slam heard around the world, but that was the match, that was the glue within that particular show that everyone still talks about today. You know what I mean? The wrestling fans, the people that love the product.
Yeah.
that's the match that people still talk about today. You
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean? And yeah, it was so kind of moving into the documentary. We kind of get to see kind of how crazy Macho Man actually was, which is it was pretty cool to see Jerry Lawler talk about it too, and because obviously Jerry's such a pivotal part of the business as well with the Memphis
yeah,
side of things, and such a huge star in his own right, never needing the rub of NWA or WWE to be fair, because he was literally Elvis in his own state kind of deal.
mm,
Um, but hearing him talk about how Savage and the boys would turn up, it's like, oh, Jerry's gonna fight me, and
yeah,
and when Jerry was like, "What the fuck is this? This guy's a lunatic! Like,
yeah, yeah,
he's gonna kill me." Basically, is
yeah,
what I felt that I got from the way Jerry Lawler was talking. But then when they did do business again, you could see that Macho had made himself a star, even those early promos. And I think
yeah,
obviously shout out to his brother, of course, the genius Lanny
yeah,
Poffo. Kind of it shows the mind that he had for the business too, didn't it? That he
yeah,
kind of suggested to Savage maybe try this, try
yeah,
that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And Lanny says once I suggested that to him, his original voice after that conversation never
Don't
showed its face again.
never exist again. And it was great to look back at those old footage of the promos, the early ones that they got the footage of. And you can see the voice isn't exactly there yet. It's just
No,
beginning to
it's
get there. It's
nearly,
kind of
but it's
halfway.
yeah.
Yeah. But he still has his own voice in it a little bit, you know?
You
And
know what it's
it
like?
was,
It's like listening to Hawkwind, which was Lemmy's first band, and then listening to Motorhead. You listen to
yeah,
Hawkwind when he first started, and he was just
yeah,
starting out, and then you hear like Ace of Spades, and you're like, "Oh shit!
yeah, absolutely.
There's the money."
Super analogy, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I was always like back in the day. I was a big fan. Like I loved him even when he was leaping Lanny Poffo and the Poet, and he was just throwing the frisbees out to the crowd, and then
yeah.
he'd get fucking 6 shades of shit kicked out of him
I
then
love
in the
him.
match. You
I
know what
love
I mean?
him.
But he always had a great poem about the opponent that was coming out, you know, and then he'd throw the frisbees out, and he was great as the James as well. The only thing I find with Lanny, I should say, I mean, I really like him, but he kind of sits on the fence a little bit too much, doesn't he? I find he tries to recollect stuff, but becomes very general in the way he approaches it.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Like, I'm a fan of him. Obviously, Hogan was a big fan of him as well, because obviously Hogan put him over as well. People forget that.
Mm,
So, I mean, Hogan was definitely a fan of that family. You know what I mean? And it showed
yeah,
that there was a good relationship there for a long period of time until that incident. And like, what people forget is that Liz incident didn't happen until WrestleMania 9.
mm,
So, I think that's how well those boys worked people into a shoot. Because when I was listening to you and Jay and all talking, I was like, right, guys, the timelines are a little bit off here. They weren't hating each other at this period. Lust in your eyes, Hogan, lust in your eyes. Like, that was actually later, when it was kind of like, which they did allude to in the documentary, when Hogan was away and Liz was staying with Linda, or is that her name? Linda? Was it Linda Hogan?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was Linda, yeah, but
And then obviously Hogan rocks up to WrestleMania 9 with that eye that, like, we know that I mean, Jim Cornette even said, I thought everyone knew that's what happened. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So like,
clearly they didn't.
yeah, like, I mean, it's so I think there was a real relationship there, and I'd say that punch came from legitimate hurt in Macho's mind. You know what I mean? In his mind, he was that way. I mean, I remember reading in the Dynamite Kid book, just to put a different story. When he was WWE champ, he was like, he went up to Dynamite and says, I hear you're one of the tough guys, and I know it. So I'm going to give you $5,000 to watch my back, because we're going to a bar tonight that's full of NWA guys. And Macho actually legit thought, because he was WWE World Champion, that, shit was going to go down. So he had paid Dynamite to be his bodyguard. And Dynamite was like, I know all these boys. Like, there's not going to be shit. And Dynamite was like, yeah, I'll take $5,000. No butters.
Yeah, I'll take 5 grand. None of these guys are going to pick around with me, so it's all good.
No butters. Like, yeah, grand.
Yeah,
I'll wear my most intimidating shirt, and I'll
yeah.
just stand there behind Macho. But
Um,
it showed the level of paranoid that he did get, though, didn't it? Like, and it's kind of like, he was such a unique character that, and I mean, his paranoia levels were insane. Like, forget about the Hogan stuff; they were insane. Like,
Yeah, he was never off it. I mean, he
No.
was riddled with paranoia without a shadow of a doubt. And I'd imagine he suffered probably badly with anxiety as well. So I'd say he got
Yes.
worked up about stuff incredibly hard.
But they wouldn't have been able to talk about that back then, you know what I mean? Like, they wouldn't have been able to show their lack of manhood back then and say, like, oh, I'm nervous or anything like that. So they'll always have to keep character, like.
Yeah, there wasn't a counselor 4 doors down where you popped in and, like, you said,
It was a doctor, all right.
Dynamite Kid and the Rougeos are up there and they're taunting me with Liz or whatever it is, or Hogan, do you know what's going on? Could we sit down and have a chat about it? No, we're going back to a time that Undertaker alluded to where lads showed up at events and they had bags there with 45s in them and stuff like that. It's a different world.
And I think that's what Undertaker was alluding to about saying today's wrestlers are soft. You know what I mean? Like, in the sense that, they'll be like, oh, I'm going to go to HR now because such and such is at them making a comment to me that I didn't really appreciate. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas back then, it was like, Harley Race would turn up and say, right, well, how about you meeting my friend here?
Yeah. Harley Race ain't knocking on Vince's door to sort out an issue. Harley Race will just walk into your locker room and upbench you. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing. And Macho was a tough guy. I mean, one of the things I really enjoyed about it was talking about his athletic background as well. And I know we're kind of segueing here. We're just kind of talking about things that come to our mind. So we're not going to do like a run through of the documentary scene for scene. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed was seeing, the athletic background that he had with obviously with the baseball, and the fact that he actually taught himself to fucking bat with his left hand. I mean, that is pretty fucking incredible. You know what I mean? And it shows how switched on he is as an athlete, as a performer, as a human being, basically, that he can actually. So that kind of, for me, from a psychological standpoint, it all makes sense to me why he'd be that paranoid, because he wants to be the best in the world at what he does, whether it be tiddlywinks, baseball,
he was driven
or wrestling.
Driven.
Exactly.
Driven, yeah. It was nice. It was nice to hear the mother talking about it as well, wasn't it? That was that. Yes. I really enjoyed that. You see, and that's what bugs me. You see, I'd like to hear more of that. And less of Bubba the Love Sponge and people like that.
That's an old interview from the actual Savage DVD. But I would have liked to hear Vince talk more, like the way Vince was actually kind of saying, all those robes, we didn't pay a dime for them. That was Savage. Yeah. You mentioned people that had a lot to say about him in his career. I mean, for me, DDP should have been on that show.
Yeah,
because
100%.
For what he done for DDP, I mean, as DDP said, I wouldn't. Obviously, DDP puts over Snake and Jake the Snake and Dusty and what they done for him. But as he said, if it wasn't for Savage saying, I think I'll take the cutter tonight,
Yeah.
Those conversations should have been had. Yeah. And how he did go to WCW, because you guys alluded to it on the Four Pod Men and what he done. And Joe, fair play to Joe, he was the one that mentioned the DDP thing, which I was happy to hear. Yeah. Like, he went in there and actually made people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you look at Savage, why is he on the turnbuckle pointing at Bret Hart at WrestleMania 10 when Bret was on the boy's shoulders? Because that wasn't Savage trying to take the limelight in a Hogan Warrior situation. That was Savage pointing and saying, that's the guy. You know what I mean?
That's where the spotlight should be.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I often find, I find with these biographies, it's really a case of, like, unless you've locked up with the man or unless you've had to write the man a check, you shouldn't really be on the biography.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Unless you're family, of course. So I just think the inclusion of some of these guys, and even the length of the inclusion, you know what I mean?
Especially Bubba the Love Sponge. I mean, shame on whoever decided to give him airtime. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And not DDP, or not, like, say, someone like, I don't know, they could have went back on old interviews with the likes of Kurt Hennig and all talking about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. There was plenty of shoot interviews out there with some of the men and women that are no longer with us when they talked about Savage, and they could have literally clipped, a couple of seconds out.
They could have fitted in the important stuff, you know what I mean? Tito Santana.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who like, it was a huge part of Savage's run to the IC belt originally, you know what I mean? Like how does he not get a big spot in this? Because he really was the one who put the gold around him, you know what I mean? And he did the work and this is when Tito at the time was a big star in WWF, you know what I mean? Yeah. He wasn't a jobber or anything, you know. But
even Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, were huge fans of Macho Man Randy Savage, and they looked up to him when they were coming up. You know what I mean? They saw because they saw Savage as the prototype that they could be. Because don't forget, Savage wasn't. I think I had a conversation years ago. I think it may have been Bobby Fulton or Nikita Koloff. I'm not sure. But they had said, like, Savage, he was actually shorter than you. I mean, he wasn't short. Like, he wasn't a 5'10" or a 5'11". He was probably about 6'1".
Yeah.
But the reason he was able to stand toe to toe with Hogan, who was probably a legit 6'6" at that time, was because he'd always be on the ball of his toes. He was always on the tippy toes. Sorry.
Yeah.
And he presented himself bigger than he actually was.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You always had the lats like pretty much tensed. He wouldn't walk around like with the shoulders down. They were always like that.
The arms were always out.
Always out. And that's what I'm saying. Like, for the likes of, Michaels and Brett, who kind of broke in just shortly after that.
Yeah.
He was such, and I've heard the two boys talk about it. He was such a prototype for them. That was the next level up. And he was the worker's worker, right?
Yeah. Isn't it mad when you think about Macho Man and you think about the narrative that's out there in terms of him being kind of a weirdo and crazy and paranoia and all this type of thing? But, like, if you go back and you look at the locker rooms he was in, I mean, he was in a locker room with Hercules. He was in a locker room with Billy Jack Haynes. He was in a locker room with Harley Race.
Yeah.
He was in a locker room with Haku. In a locker room with all these guys. It was practically a sports entertainment asylum when you think about
definitely.
it. Because, like, you'd be hard pressed to actually find a person who kind of wasn't sort of kind of off his head a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Nut jobs.
But we always kind of
Hillbilly Jim just sitting in the corner, like,
Yeah, like this
with a bucket and a pig. Jake the Snake over in the corner with a bag with a fucking
cobra
in it. Like,
cobra, yeah. You know what I mean? It was
actually
just
mental.
Yeah, but you just think, and then of course you throw Warrior into the mix as well, who's just, as Jay said, just running up and down through walls.
Lads, I have to say, shout out to that. I marked out for that comment. For anyone that hasn't watched it, go and watch the Four Pod Men and their talk about Macho Man Randy Savage. Jay just comes up with a genius. It's not even a narrative. It's like, if you close your eyes, you can picture it in your mind. It's like, in one locker room, you've got the Warrior running around just bouncing into walls, and then you have Macho coming in going, ooh, yeah. And the two boys just stop and look at each other and go, ooh, I get it.
Yeah. You can close your eyes and just be in that locker room, can't
you?
If you close your eyes.
With
Jay's
someone like poor El Sean Mooney standing outside, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Sean Mooney standing there going, "Where's me and Gene?"
Yeah, I think this one is for you, me and Gene.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But, like, it's the same as you said as well. I think you brought up the point that, when he was doing the interviews and he'd just bring the gimmicks in, like, he'd have, like, whatever he found. And I think it was you that mentioned it, wasn't it? That it's almost like he just saw something like I don't know, like a pot and pan or something, and he'd be like, hold that, Gene.
Yeah, just like the cup and the saucer and the cream of the crop, you know what I mean? And handing Gene the brush, the yard brush and all this kind of thing.
That is kind of like the cream of the crop.
I remember when Perry Saturn came in then, and he had left the Radicals. And he was doing the moppy thing and stuff like that. I looked at that and I always used to think back to Macho Man going, this lad's just grabbed something that he found in the corridor and he's able to just sling a promo against that so easy, you know what I mean? Just craziness, like,
it was the first thing that he was able to get gimmicks over without them being relevant. And I think if you look at in our time now, like later in life, Jericho's able to do that with a pen, or with a list.
Clipboard.
Oh yeah, or the word "it." You're gonna get it. What is it? It's
only a man like Jericho or Macho Man can get you to pay $20 for a clipboard that's about $1.99 in a stationery shop. You know what I mean? It's the genius of it. And the funny thing about it is neither of them need it, because they're such outlandish characters. And even Jericho, he doesn't need any of that because he's just so good. Macho Man was the same. He didn't need to walk in with the cup or saucer or the broom or any of that kind of stuff because he's just so out there and iconic and crazy anyway. But it just shows how much they care.
What about, we would be remiss if we didn't speak about the gear. the gear, because that's a huge talking point on the documentary. And the fact that he spent, like, he was someone that wouldn't spend money. He was very smart with his money. He saved his money. I know you saw Natalia talking as well, saying that you'd go to their home, and it wasn't like, even though it was on Tampa Bay, it wasn't one of the more lavish ones. It wasn't like the biggest house on the block. That was probably reserved for Hogan, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you'd go in and they talk about that OCD thing, like that you know, you wouldn't be allowed to touch anything. And again, we go back.
Yeah.
This is, I'm looking at this from a psychological point of view, going, right, this tells me that a man is OCD. He's fucking, you know, it's the same with all of his matches, you know, in WWE. Once he got past that hump, I'd say from WrestleMania 3 onwards, that's why his matches either cut the mustard for Vince or didn't, because we all heard that famous story where Vince made him and Ric Flair go out and do the match again because he thought it was tripe. And of course, Flair is coming out going, how do I work with this guy that's writing down? I'm literally at the drinking 20 kamikazes in the bar today, and probably about 8 or 9 beers. As we know, Flair always said he drank the day before the show, and then he'd kind of go to the gym and kind of sweat a bit out of him. But, you know, Flair still had a bit of sauce in him. So doesn't that kind of lend itself, when you hear those stories from real people like Natalia, who probably was there as a kid? I mean, we had Brahman on last week on the Dynamo's Dozen talking about when she was in with Macho and Elizabeth, and they were allowed to play around their locker room, no problem. So these are people that know that period and know the people that are involved, you know what I mean, properly. So it tells you 1,000 stories, that, doesn't it? Like, you know, take your shoes off when you come into my house, you know, and don't touch anything, you know.
But like, I could just imagine, can you imagine being the seamstress or the clothing maker, the tailor, who had to make his stuff? I'd say they probably made 3 or 4 attempts at those robes, and he'd walk in and find one little bit of sequence off and go, make it again. Just I don't know how many times. I'd say he never walked into a seamstress or a tailor and walked out with one of his robes straight away, or one of his outfits straight away. I'd say they lost money on what he paid them because of the amount of hours they had to put in and redoing stuff to make sure it was absolutely perfect. I'd say they were scared every time they heard he was coming in to have a look at stuff.
Yeah, because your man that was doing him, like, you can tell he's probably an old 70s, 80s, you know, gay guy that probably all the lads loved. You know, as he said, all the pimps used to come to him, and it was always the gay guys like that had the vision of making stuff. I'd say he would have been one of those lads that was probably going, oh, my material. I'm wasting so much material here on this guy. What do I do? You know, but that's what he spent money on. You know what I mean? He spent money on his gimmick. And that was it. Everything else he saved and saved and saved. And, you know, when you hear the story, when he passed, that most of his money, if not all of it, went to charity, and some obviously to his family. It shows you what kind of human being he was. And it was kids' charities as well, because obviously, you know, Brahman had said as well that him and Liz, or him and any of his partners, they never had kids. But he was such a fan of kids, you know what I mean? And it was genuine. The sick kids, like, especially kids with, you know, ailments or illnesses and stuff like that, you know, it showed the good nature and heart of the man.
And I think, like, you know, you can see that there's good-hearted nature there in terms of, like, you know, how much he cared about how he cared so much about how he presented himself to the audience and the level at which he wanted to operate, that he probably nearly made himself sick to the point of caring so much. You know what I mean? And we've often heard the narrative before. I mean, you know, you've come from a wrestling school. I mean, one of the things you're probably told when you start in a wrestling school is you got to invest in yourself if you want other people to invest in you. And he just took that to the moon, you know, without a shadow of a doubt. And I mean, no, not dissimilar even to Warrior, you know what I mean? They put it out there without a shadow of a doubt.
Very similar, actually.
To create these iconic characters that we love and behold today. You know, no one necessarily always remembers the guy who just rocked out in the trunks and the knee pads, you know what I mean?
It's like Sting and Flair and Dusty Rhodes as well, isn't it? You know what I mean? You looked at Sting, like, every week there was a different gimmick on as well, do you know, different colored tights, and I would 100% agree with that. Even when you realistically look at all the top stars, you look at Michaels, you look at Bret, they never wore the same ring gear every week. They change it up a little bit. Something would be different. You know what I
they'd
mean?
always have a pay-per-view one or something like that. Or a big event.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point that you bring up, because it's like, you know, I remember listening to a Raven Secrets of the Ring documentary, which I think I bought in your shop, or else I stole off one of the old wrestlers.
No, you got it off, mate.
Yeah. I think
Ring of Honor one.
Yeah. And I remember going, yeah, like you said, like even if you don't have money, it doesn't actually take a lot. You can literally go down and spend $50 on material or whatever and make some ring jackets and stuff like that to make yourself stand out. You know what I mean? And that's what Savage done. It was, he lived the gimmick, man. He really, I mean, he's the epitome of living the gimmick. Same with Warrior.
I remember on that Raven interview, he spent nearly 20 minutes talking about the importance of a ring jacket.
Yeah.
Just a ring jacket. And I remember he repeated it. He came over here for a seminar, I think, with the IWW back in the day. He spoke to those trainees as well for about 25, 30 minutes, talking about the importance of investing in yourself as a character and spending some money up front to do these things, and how important the ring jacket was and stuff like that. Like, and that's good, because Raven has a serious mind for the business.
Oh yeah, you even Stone Cold Steve Austin said that in his book. He said Raven is the guy. He probably missed a boat in terms of what he achieved in terms of the levels, because he could have probably went to the moon, but he had his own kind of things going on. But it's the same with I remember that DVD actually. He talked about Loki. He said Loki used to come out, and when he was in Ring of Honor, he goes, "Why don't you have a ring jacket?" And Loki was like, "Well, I've got to show my body." And he goes, "Yeah, but imagine you walked out to the ring and didn't show your body, and then presented it to everyone like Rick Rude." You know what I mean? Rick Rude used to do that. Take my robe off, you know, and he'd do it slowly, and that's when you got the you got the money shot, you know.
Yeah, if I'm right, I think he was instrumental in AJ Styles, wasn't he? With the jacket on the hood. Remember that little thing?
Absolutely was.
And I think he had a part to play in that. I'm not sure now, but I think
CM Punk
he did
as well. He was very instrumental in CM Punk kind of changing up little things with his character as well. Raven is absolutely a super talent. I know we're going off topic here, but I suppose to bring it back, what we are talking about is the importance of, like, if Savage had have just looked like he did back in the 70s, it was great gear, and he looked like a savage, but you would have just thought he's just another wrestler, really. You know what I mean? It was like, it wasn't like he was wearing, you know, I mean, his gear looked very similar to Billy Jack Haynes, right? You know, with the yellow boots and yellow knee pads and the green and then the pink. But the difference maker for him was, and you see, Hogan and Austin are once in a lifetime. They are people that are so clued in to what their audience is that they could get away with the bare minimum. And don't forget, Hulk Hogan, I would imagine, when you were standing in the aisleway when Hulk Hogan was making his entrance down, you were looking at that lad going, what is this human being? Like, this is a real life comic book character, because he was such a massive man. So the likes of the Warrior and Savage, they were like, right, we can't be Hogan, because he's wearing bare minimum. I mean, Hogan got away with fucking red knee pads and yellow tights and yellow, like with a balding head and a t-shirt that he threw into the crowd and hulked up. That's why and it's the same with Austin. He walked down all black, but where did Austin get it from? Mike Tyson. We're all black. You know? So it's it showed like the dedication, and I think that's where Savage really doesn't get enough credit for, is that he lived the gimmick and he invested in the gimmick.
Well, see, the comparison really is if you go and you look at him when he's in the Spider-Man movie. Now, I know he's geared up and he's ginormous and stuff like that, obviously for the part.
All natural, no,
but
natural.
all that good. Those good doctors down in Florida, I loved them. And but like, you know, the way he's just in a black cut off kind of like sleeveless black t-shirt, but even though he's huge, but he doesn't look as iconic as when he's in the jackets and when he's the glasses, the hats and the headbands and all that kind of stuff. And this is in a movie, you know, where they dampened it down, even though he was.
Well, he done the same gimmick in Nitro, like in late '99 as well. Remember in '99 when he was coming out with Gorgeous George and all, and he had the cap on backwards and he had the glasses on, and he was ripped, and he just had that literally bet on sweater with Macho Madness on it or something. It wasn't the same. Even in WCW when he was just wearing the black and white and the Macho Madness and the tops, it was like, it's great, it's Macho Man, but it's not the same. Like, and I think he went to WCW because he was like right, I'm going here to prove to these motherfuckers up in New York that this kid ain't ready to be retired yet, which you guys obviously talked about, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
And he probably spent less worrying about the whole big long robes and stuff like that. He left that up to Flair, because Flair needed that too. You know what I mean? Flair probably did start it before Macho with that whole robe thing and everything, but like he just took it to a different level. Like Flair's looked like they were just made for the Queen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, you think about that time in WWF as well. Like a lot of guys suddenly started wearing ring jackets and stuff like that. You know, I mean, the Can-Am Connection used to come out with jackets on. The Young Stallions used to
the
come
Hart
out.
Foundation, then remember
Hart
the
Foundation.
Foundation?
Yeah. So they all sort of latched onto
Jim Neidhart Foundation, as some
Jim the Anvil Foundation. Yeah. Shout out to Jay. But yeah, like you could see that it was triggering all the time. As a matter of fact, very few people. I mean, the only one I can remember, like even Jake went down the road of a jacket eventually.
He did,
and he used to come out just topless with the bag over, with the snake over the shoulder.
Warrior was the same.
Yeah. So like they all latched onto this whole thing, but I just think it is absolutely iconic. The clothing and just it was an extension of the man, if you like. Without a shadow of a doubt. You know, he's the man who wanted to walk into a party room and the place just to stop and go, fuck, he's here. And that's what he got.
Definitely. And I think that's exactly like it. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm now contemplating next week doing a Bono on it and having like shades on, even though there's not much sun here in Ireland, and just changing it up, you know what I mean, and having little tassels come from the microphone and be like, you are listening to the Dynamo Podcast Network. You know what I mean? Is that what we need to do as podcasters now as well when we think about it? You know what I mean? It's like
oh, I tell you.
You know, but no, I mean, I suppose in closing, when we talk about Macho Man, you know, you guys covered it in the doc, you know, in the show. With the pod men, but like for the documentary, I suppose it is a good narrative. We did get to see a bit of an insight into the man. I think there was enough fair people in his corner as well. I think even to Terry Bollea and Hogan, he didn't throw him under the bus either. Do you know what I mean? He did talk about the importance of him as well. Like as much as he may have talked about certain situations, I still think Hogan is fair to his memory. Do I believe in my heart of hearts that they made up? No, I don't believe that ever happened. I think Hogan still wishes that happened, but I don't think that ever happened.
I'm a Hulk Hogan fan, but I don't know whether I'd agree that he's fair to his memory. I'd probably believe quite the opposite, you know. I don't know this. I don't know whether the situation with Liz went down the way it was portrayed. Let's be honest here now, and I've no proof. It's just an opinion, but the way it came across in the biography, it was like all her clothes were over in Hogan's house, but she was staying in another guy's house, and like, come on. You know what I mean? There's only so much that I believe, like Hogan talking about how I got out of the shower and he was at the door. I was dripping wet. I was trying to explain to him what happened. Come on, stop. You know what I mean? There's only so far you can go with that, you know. And then, then they bring in, like, they get down the road of the tragedy of Liz and stuff like that. And you've got Lex Luger sitting there. And, you know, Lex Luger they have him in the chair nearly with the silhouette light on him, like he's like an apparition or something like that, or a spirit or something, you know. And he's there going, yeah, well, you know, like we both made our own choices on the path that we took. No, you didn't. Stop. This was a lovely lady that you took advantage of and you sent her down the wrong path. And it doesn't matter. We all know in history what happened. And you can try and turn around and set the narrative that, like, you know, the tragedy of all this and stuff like that. You could have sorted it and you didn't.
Here's a shout out to Kev Rocks. Here's a shout out to Kev Rocks. This you were there for this famous comment that came out of yours truly's mouth. Lex Luger, he has a fucking figure and he doesn't even have a gaff. What's the story with that? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I was never a big Lex fan, I have to say. I mean, it's amazing how many of these lads find God when, like, there's nowhere else to turn to, isn't it?
I think a lot of time people, and no disrespect to religion or anything like that, or anyone out there who has demons and they have to find a pathway to go somewhere.
Absolutely.
But I think in some of these cases, people find God because they're looking for absolution from previous lives, sins, if you like, that they
Yeah.
find it very difficult to get over. And they think that if they go praying once a week and they drum that beat of the Bible and stuff like that, that there's absolution for them somewhere down the road, where in reality there isn't. You know
Yeah,
what I
no,
mean?
I
That's how
agree.
I believe. And I've nothing against religion and like
Me
that, you
too.
know. I would have beliefs and stuff like that to a certain point, but when you hear it coming from that, it's at times it's hard to take, you know. And I preface that by saying I was a huge Lex Luger fan. I loved the total package. I loved the stuff he did with Barry Windham and the Horsemen, and you know, all that kind of stuff, and the fun with the Lex Express and all that kind of stuff. I've no problem with that, you know. But like, you know, sometimes you feel with these guys when they come on these documentaries, they're playing the victim card all the time. You know, here I am 20 years later or whatever it is, I'm still hurting. I'm still
But you
trying to
don't
get over.
get to play the victim card because a young lady lost her life. You know what I mean? And like, this is where I come. I'm gonna preface it by saying I was never a Luger fan, so fuck Luger personally. If he wants to come on Dynamo's doesn't, that's no problem. I'd love that. No, but you know, I just I didn't like how all that went down. And there's only one way that we know it went down. There's no way of sugarcoating it. Do you know what I mean? We
No.
can talk about Macho Man being this guy and that guy that done this and done that, but he didn't do what Lex done. Like, it was nasty. It was very, very much taking basically a young one that was very, very vulnerable. I think by all accounts, the feeling that I get from this documentary, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Liz was quite a vulnerable lady. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it goes to showing the level of protection that Macho was trying to afford to her. He obviously knew himself that was a certain sort of
personality trait of hers.
But just a sort of like you know, a softness to her personality that wouldn't bode well in a tank of sharks, you know. And I just think he sort of protected her too much and went the wrong way about it. And then when she went the other way, she was left to her own devices. And yeah, we would say like these were both adults who were partaking in what was going on and stuff like that. And I accept that. But you know, for me, when you go back and you look at these things, the victim is always the person who's under the ground.
Well, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Like, and to be fair, I don't think it would be a fair kind of show to do without talking about Liz. And you know, this is, I suppose, this is the best way to close it. It's just an out and out tragedy that the two of them are no longer with us. The same with sensational Sherry, who was a big part of Macho Man's career. You know what I mean? Everyone knows. I know you kind of gave me a bit of a shout out when you were talking about Sherry, and I know Jay mentioned on the Four Podmen that we'll have to do a Sherry show at some point. I agree. But I think it's just such a tragic thing. And not that I would wish any ill will on Lex Luger or anything like that. I'm not saying that. You know, I mean, look, he's whatever his deal is now. I'm a firm believer in karma. I don't know whether that's karma come into play. I really don't, and it's not for me to say. I wish him well. You know, I accept that he's probably found God and stuff like that, but I do find it horse shit when some of these guys, like you say, try to play victim when you knew very well what you were doing at the time was wrong. You know, it's easy to fucking, you know.
What was your feeling on the Gorgeous George segments and stuff like that? And I think it was the sister, was it, with the face blocked out, like she was some sort of like what would you call it, witness protection program or something like that. I was like, going, what was that about? And sitting there and saying, yeah, Macho Man took ecstasy. Look, if we're sitting here and we thought that Macho Man only took ecstasy, we'd be very happy. You know what I mean? At the level that these boys were operating on and stuff like that. You know what I mean? She made it sound like ecstasy was like 10 shots of heroin a day or something like that, you know? And then
it's another kind of person that had no talent. This is my opinion on it. All right, Gorgeous George had absolutely no talent other than possibly doing a couple of dances and getting dollars thrown at her. And like, don't get me wrong, that's not a fucking diss to strippers anywhere. I understand everyone has to make a buck, everyone has to make a living. I am not judging anybody. I don't judge anyone. You know that, Niall.
We all have bills. We all have bills.
We all have bills. I get that. But when you come into the wrestling industry and you try to, you know, use basically, I feel this is what I feel is that they used what happened with the man to make a quick buck, and they waited till his passing to start doing shoot interviews about it and all. Oh, well, he was very possessive of me. He was very controlling. When, like Lanny Poffo, and I know I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. I know Lanny Poffo was his brother, but at the same time, his own mother as well said that when he met the lady that he did marry, which was his first kind of love or his first kind of girlfriend,
Yeah.
anybody that was around that relationship says that it was nothing but love, and Macho was completely different. And I mean, this isn't long after the whole Gorgeous George thing, you know what I mean? So I think if that's in your DNA and in your personality to just be to be a scumbag, basically, is what they're. Let's be real, they're trying to convey him as a scumbag. A lot of these people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what I was saying at the start when I said I was enjoying the biography till it took a sharp left.
Yeah.
What was your making of the thing about he had the cameras fitted in the house and all? It's a bit of a push, isn't it? Really, like
the thing about it is, look, again, I think it's an easy thing to say after the fact when the man is no longer here to fucking defend himself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's wrong about these documentaries. If you're going to make accusations like that, if you don't know that they're 100% fact or truth, I think they should be left out, personally.
Yeah, I don't think on something like this, unless it's an actual crime documentary or something like that, or making a murder, don't come on and make accusations and statements and stuff like that, and you're faceless. You're faceless. Your face is clouded out, and you're there going. You won't even show yourself.
You had cameras. But you're a weasel. Then you're a pussy because you're literally not willing to back up. This, but that's also the problem with some of these documentaries as well. Now I have to say the Piper one was a little bit better, which we're going to do next week, because it was, in fairness, more of a fair reflection, I think, on the man's life. And I think the Stone Cold Steve Austin one was a very fair reflection, but Stone Cold is here to defend himself too. And Stone Cold was able to kind of point out his own faults with his marriages and with his daughters and with his kids. So that's something we can look forward to. But I think in this one, I think overall it was a good documentary. For me, I took the good out of it. Was looking back at his career and looking at the good stuff. I tend to ignore a lot of this non-starter nonsense. Because I think you and me as fans, Niall, who have been fans of the man since pretty much day one, I think we get that there's going to be a lot of hanger-oners and people trying to make money out of his name. And look, I'm sure some of these, I guarantee you'll get a little bit of a mini explosion of Gorgeous George shoot interviews now from people that will give her her 15 minutes, and she'll probably request a certain amount of money from it, and power to her. But like I think it's very easy to fire shots at people that are no longer with us.
I just think when I look at the biographies like that, it's these are really important pieces that the likes of A&E or Dark Side of the Ring put together. But in some respects, you have to be really careful because you have a fan base there. Obviously, guys like us who have been following wrestling for years, we kind of know most of the stories. And if we don't, we can see through a lot of the rubbish.
Yes.
But if you're a young enough fan, and I don't mean young to the point where, you're not of age that you should be watching it or something like that. But if you're a young fan who's going to take that up, you might have a very different view of Macho Man Randy Savage if that documentary is 1 hour and it didn't finish after 40 minutes. And then you hear about, the stuff with Gorgeous George, you hear about, the stuff with Hogan, you hear about all this stuff. That's not necessarily how he should be painted. These biographies should be a legacy piece. And yes, there is elements of every man's career, if you do a biography, that doesn't sit well with some people. But I just thought this documentary took such a sharp left, and it suddenly became about Liz, Lex, Hogan, Gorgeous George, Bischoff's wife, her best friend. Come on now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That they just stretched certain little things. I could have sat here and I would have told you that biography was a 10 out of 10 if I hadn't nearly finished after 40 minutes.
Yes, that's how I felt. You
know what I mean? I just thought.
It's funny you say that, because I actually took a pee break. I'd say around about the 45 minute mark. Just before all the Gorgeous George stuff and all came in, and I was just like, it was very, very like, and some of these women should hang their own heads in shame as well, if they are lying and making it up. You know what I mean? Because you're basically trying to cash in on on a man that's no longer with us that can defend himself, and that's my problem with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It tells volumes about the kind of human being you are if
Yeah,
that's the
and
path that you take.
man or woman.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
yeah,
That's why I said human. That's why I said human being.
because Bubba the Love Sponge, in my opinion, is a piece of shit human being. Like, I mean, he basically whored his wife out to Hogan, and then
threw him under the bus.
thought he could make a book out of it, and he lost in a court of law. You
And
know,
then spent years on a radio show that had a huge audience. Without a shadow of a doubt, he was a draw with a massive radio
he
show.
was.
And himself and Hogan spent years trying to tease Macho Man out all the time, throwing him under the bus at every opportunity and stuff like that. What the hell are they even doing on the documentary? They've nothing good to say. And if I often believe you live your life, if you've nothing good to say nothing.
Yeah, Hogan is a kind of a weasel in that sense. And to be fair, there's a reason. You know, Hogan tried to play victim on a show recently when he was talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he was like, I couldn't believe, like, when Stone Cold and Bret Hart came out, like, for Bret Hart's Hall of Fame, and I was sitting there and I reached my hand out to both of them, and they both shunned me. Well, why they didn't do that for no reason? You know what I mean?
Yeah. You reap what you sow. And like I said already, I am a Hogan fan.
Me
I'll always
too.
come across a Hogan fan. I mean, I still believe there'll be no pro wrestling at the level that we see it today if we hadn't
And
had characters like
I don't think Hogan's a scumbag by choice.
Yeah.
I think Hogan, and I don't think he's a scumbag at all. I think Hogan is actually deep down a good guy. I think he's too trusting with a lot of these people. Maybe not so much anymore, but I mean, I think there's a reason that they bring him back, and I think that there's a reason that people forgive Hogan eventually, because I think underneath there is a good person. I don't know. Maybe
but
I'm being too nice.
I think on a documentary like that, or a biography like that, you should reach into your soul and have a real good look and bring a little bit of sincerity to it. Not necessarily, push the narrative, but not necessarily throw yourself under the bus either or something like that, if that's the case. But come across being a little bit sincere. Don't try and work the audience. It's 2021. Everyone knows the score. Everyone knows what's evolved in wrestling history. Be a bigger person by doing it the right way. And I just think, as you said, I think his fair play in terms of his mindset is very selective at times.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I think so. And I think he's trying to look. We don't know what's going on in that man's mind now. He probably is trying in his own way to appear on these shows to get his own kind of, I don't know, what's the word, forgiveness maybe, or trying to, either way, I think it's wrong. I don't think he should be on all these shows. I would agree with you. I think Hogan appearing on every time there's a show about the Ultimate Warrior or about Macho Man is wrong. You know what I mean? Because they weren't friends. You have to get over that. Yeah. You may have been friends one time, yous aren't now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Yous didn't have the greatest relationship at the end. I mean, Macho Man wrote a fucking rap album shitting on you. And you're telling me that like 2 years later it was just all G, baby, when the man isn't around anymore to basically verify that? I don't know. And it's the same with Warrior, you know what I mean? We heard Dana Warrior say that, Hogan was basically stalking them after the fucking Hall of Fame thing as well, saying like they were getting messages and not replying, and they were kind of like, he's kind of leaving a bad taste in their mouth. And look, that could have been from a place of goodness where he was trying to make up for, faults or whatever. But at the same time, leave it be, man. Leave it be,
But see, the problem with that narrative is that situation evolves with a number of different people. And there's only so many times you can go to the well of forgiveness, to get absolution. And I just think it's just, you see when he jumped off the golf cart for Warrior and stuff like that, and, we knew what was going on. We knew there was a little bit. I know that the narrative came out that they were told to avoid each other all weekend, don't go near each other and all something. That was a total setup. You don't just glide by on a golf cart and Warriors just walk.
Well, I'd say Warrior was oblivious to it, to be fair. But I'd say, because make no mistake about this, ladies and gentlemen, before we close, Hogan will always be very special to Vinnie Mac, and in due course, very special to Stephanie and Hunter. That's why he's brought back to host WrestleManias. Like he was brought back there to put Hogan in good light with the whole thing of, the whole racial thing this year.
Yeah.
And in fairness, I thought the two boys done a good job, and fair play to
Yeah.
the two of them. They made it entertaining. Hogan will always be Vince's man, and Vince is very, very loyal to his people, to a fault. He might sack you, he might screw you, he might do whatever, but good Lord, he brings you back. Like, and I think Triple H is the same. I mean, look, Triple H always puts Bret Hart over in documentaries now. And Bret Hart is slating Triple H every chance he gets.
Yeah.
So Hogan is there, and Hogan was probably planted at that WrestleMania there to go, look, he's going to be around there. This is going to be really good for a documentary. Just go over and apologize to him. Make it
I think
clear.
the only way I can sum it up to end out for you is giving forgiveness and seeking forgiveness are two very different human beings.
I think
that's the only way I can sum it up,
I think that's a great analogy as well. Like, and in fairness, like I could I could call you a name or something, or do something to annoy you, and I'm like, Jesus, Niall, sorry, I'm really sorry about that, and you'll go, boom, that's no problem. Like, once bitten, twice shy. That's the old saying. Once bitten, twice shy.
Yeah.
When you have a history of making these kind of mistakes, and then all of a sudden you get an epiphany, it's like, okay, so were you a drug addict?
Yeah.
What's the story? It's like, you know what I mean? What was the deal? What was making you do this? Oh, you didn't have any interior drug problems, or interior drug problems is probably definitely the wrong kind of terminology, but you didn't have a habit of any sort, a drug habit, or something that was making your mind go a little bit mental.
Yeah.
It was just you actually all along.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then what are you really sorry for now? Are you sorry because it's like a thief will always be sorry when he's caught, but he's not sorry when he's in the act.
Yeah. When your career of seeking apologies is nearly as long as your career of wrestling, you know you haven't done the right thing. And that's the only way. That's the only way I can.
But how many wrestlers can we talk about like that? You know what I mean? We can look at Shawn Michaels as one. Mr. Apology. Hogan is Mr. Apology. There's so many.
Yeah, but I think Shawn is more accepting of what he had done, and I think in Shawn's case it's kind of slightly different. I think insofar as, like, he's not always pushing the narrative where he wants to meet up with you and go, look, I'm really sorry for that and stuff like that. Like if you look at Shawn, in terms of Shawn's career and stuff like that, and the amount of people, everything that got trotted on and stuff like that and all, it's really only Bret where he tried to make amends. But he stood on a load of people.
Yeah, it's only Bret that he's actually.
I mean?
Yeah, no, and you know what? Yeah, I think that's more out of respect, isn't it? Like that he was like, shit, I respect the hell out of
I think in respect to Shawn, I think he's trying to find peace within himself, where I think the others tend to seek peace from others instead of looking within themselves.
And that's a good point, because in fairness, like, realistically, it was like Shawn went out of his way to make sure he fucking, because he said it in his retirement speech, didn't he? He said, there's one guy I need to, and he made it, it was the last part of the speech as well. There's one guy that I caused more, and I think, Niall, you're probably onto something there. I think that's probably because they were such good friends. It's not just some randomer. It's like, A, I respect you as a talent, but B, I respect you as a friend. And I realize, like, I don't care if I stood on Vader's head or anyone else. It's like, you were the Mecca, and the both of us were basically two peas in the same pod that were bringing this wrestling evolution, should we say, the evolving kind of aspect of wrestling, taking it from the, as they say, the dinosaur period of the big, huge jacked guys, and it was Bret and Shawn that done that, and I think that's probably where that's coming from. So, but look, that's a different topic for another conversation.
That's another episode without a shadow.
Another episode, exactly. But guys, I think this is why you're going to enjoy our shows. It starts with Macho, and look, but it all revolves back to Macho. That's what we're talking about here. It all comes back to Macho, and look, I encourage people to watch the documentary for themselves. I don't think A&E done a horrible job all across the board. I think Niall's 100% correct. I think, you've got about 40 to 45 good minutes in there, and then I think they end with some nasty business where I thought they should have, if they were going to go with that, they probably should have got that out early enough.
And I would also encourage anyone who's going to watch it or hasn't watched it or has watched it, form your own opinion.
Yes.
Don't be driven by the narrative of the last 20 minutes that you watch or something like that.
No.
Form your own opinion.
Yeah, and not even us. If you disagree with us, let us know in the comment section. Like, if you disagree, absolutely let us know why you think we are wrong and you think what we're saying doesn't make sense. But I think you will find that what we are saying is making perfect sense, and I don't think you should. And what Niall said earlier, especially you young guys and girls out there that didn't necessarily grow up back in the day following all that, and because we are in a culture at the moment where, like, you're instantly going to dismiss someone to cancel them. Oh no, they shouldn't even be talked about again because of the way they've done this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think this documentary doesn't lend itself any favors when you're looking back in periods where there wasn't necessarily that PC culture or anything like that. You know what I mean? And it was different times as well.
Yeah.
You know, where education and mental health and, you know, even education on drug use and alcohol use wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Just don't judge 80s and 90s in 2021.
Yeah. And that gives us a free pass.
Pretty much. Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, it's been awesome, Niall. I think I think this is going to be good. I think this is going to go down well. I think next week we're going to talk about the Piper one.
Yep.
And yeah, I can't wait for that, to be honest with you, because as everyone knows, the Rowdy one is my he's one of my top 5 for sure. Savage is too. It's just when you're as old as us, Niall, and you're as old old a fan as we are, your top 5 can change on a weekly basis. Like,
well, so looking at the listing that A&E are doing for this, there's not a bad one in it. They're all our heroes of our child.
I know. They're all going to be our top 5s, and there's going to be 25 in them.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Well, look,
fantastic.
I think that's been an awesome show. Once again, please do like, follow, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification on YouTube under the Dynamo Podcast Network page. We have playlists in there that has absolutely everything that you want. If you're a Dynamo's Dozen fan, just type in Dynamo's Dozen. There you go. You've got your Dynamo's Dozen playlist. If you're a fan of the upper tier, if you're a fan of football, if you're a fan of metal, if you're a fan of whatever it is on the show, we've obviously got Kingwell's Court, the upper tier, Dynamo's Dozen, the 4 Podmen, Retrotainment. Yep. So we've got everything there that you need. So we're very easily accessible.
And I suppose a big shout out to A&E for taking the leap and doing the documentaries.
Absolutely, to A&E, yeah. And I love what A&E is doing. I don't fault them as a company. I think they're making some good documentaries. So absolutely, I love it. And also shout out to A&E for not bringing up some of the controversy that is conspiracy theory too. And we won't even mention that. So I think in that sense we can give them a kind of a bow of the hat.
Absolutely.
And a regal gesture, you know. But Niall, been a pleasure as always. You are my right hand man, and we'll look forward to next week, right?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Until
then, for me, Ian the Dynamo Kelly, for the money team, Mr. Niall Hogan.
Back this Monday.
Oh yeah, Dynamo's Dozen is over and